For the first time in a long time, the Edmonton Oilers got taste of life without Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. Thankfully, both won't be out in the long term, but it does present some opportunities for this upcoming week, all on today's edition of Locked On Oilers.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Victory Monday edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your host, Nick Zararis. I want to thank everyone that's making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On today's show, we are going to walk through what this week of games represents. And the Oilers don't play again until Wednesday, which is a big help when you're dealing with injuries. And the crux of today's conversation is going to be what this type of situation presents for you as players on a team and from a coaching staff perspective. So we're going to start with an open-ended conversation, a dialogue, if you will, about injuries, injury management, and the mindset you need to have as an organization. We will pivot to the opportunities this is going to open up and who's going to have opportunities to get more run in the absence of Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. And then we'll tie a bow on today's episode by talking about how this is a strong opportunity for guys to assert themselves, to make a statement. And in the course of a long season, opportunities sometimes are few and far between. Sometimes, through no fault of your own, you just have a hard time finding a way. And guys have good years, guys have down years, guys have average years. That's kind of the beauty of a long NHL career. You saw Nuge pick up the hat trick on Saturday, and that's a guy who I was at dinner on Saturday night with a couple of friends, and we were talking about, well, what's different from the Oilers this year versus last year? And I said, they just had more scoring. You know, they're going to finish 20-something, 30-something goals fewer than they recorded last year. And some of that is guys who left. You lose a Fogle, Noah Vander Kane. That's 45, 50 goals right there, just the two of those guys. And then you get into the regression of Zach Hyman and Nugent-Hopkins, and McDavid's going to be a little bit below what he was last year, and you're going to get a little bit less from Nuge. Leon's doing his best to fill in that gap all on his own, but that's only one guy. And that's where we'll start. In professional sports, in contact sports, you cannot account for injuries. You cannot prepare for injuries. Now, there are different types of injuries. Some of those are wear and tear, accumulative injuries, and some of them are freak accidents. The freak accident ones, there's nothing you can do. You know, someone eats a puck to the face and they got to wear a fishbowl for a month like Zach Hyman. It happens. There is nothing you can do as a team to prevent that type of play. If you wanted to mandate, and I know this was a point of conversation because Tom Fitzgerald, the Devils general manager, brought it up as far as neck guards to prevent neck cuts, but if you were a team and you wanted to mandate all your players wear the fishbowl so they can't run the risk of eating a puck to the nose or the mouth and needing that dental work or breaking their nose, you would immediately get injunctions by the NHL Players Association. Though I think you could stand to improve the game from that perspective, because ultimately we want to see the best players play, and these are preventative measures. You know, we're not that far removed from no helmets. You know, we are not that far removed from Craig McTavish taking the face-off in Game 7 of the 94 Cup Final with no helmet. You know, 30 years is kind of a long time, but it's not really a long time. And that's kind of how I look at it from a safety perspective. For those types of preventable injuries, you know, if it were up to me, I would be mandating neck guards. I would be mandating cage or fishbowl, whichever one you prefer, because you guys are too important. If we can prevent a type of injury that we know is relatively common in our game through a very simple piece of equipment, that's a missed opportunity there. And no team is going to be able to do that because, like I said, the Players Association would fight them on it vehemently for individual freedom. But at the same time, you would have a real competitive advantage if you had an entire team of guys who were wearing fishbowls. You couldn't fight, so your guys wouldn't be out of the game for 5 minutes at a time. You can't take off your own helmet in a fight anymore. We know we got rid of that rule about 10 years ago now. You would prevent pucks and sticks to the mouth being an issue. And generally speaking, you would rule out an entire class of injuries there. Now, there are drawbacks to that. Guys would have to adjust, but you wear a face mask at lower levels of hockey down here in the States. Not the end of the world if you got to wear a cage on your helmet. But again, I get it. Then there's the other side of things. There is the wear and tear, there is accumulative injury, and there are compensation injuries. So when we talk about wear and tear, a lot of the time I talk about it on this show in the context of an older player not getting back up to 100% on their gas tank. I made the comparison a few weeks ago that once you hit 30, 31 as a professional hockey player, it starts to be like a phone that you've charged too many times. And if you go into your phone settings and you look at the battery life, it'll tell you the max charge is no longer 100%. It'll say like 93, 92, 91%. And that's kind of what it's like when you're a professional athlete once you get to a certain age and you don't rebound as quickly, and it's harder to get that tank all the way full again. You got to go through more rigorous training. You have to be a little bit more militant in your preparation in terms of your diet, your physical activity, etc., to be ready to play an 82 game season followed by several rounds in the postseason. And when you are an injured players stay injured. I don't remember whose book that was in. It might have been in Michael Lombardi's. It might have been in another book. It might have been in Ian O'Connor's book about Bill Belichick. But one of the things the Patriots always did when they were considering bringing guys in was the medical history. And if a guy is chronically injured, they are going to stay injured, because when a guy is chronically injured, even when they get back to full health, they're compensating in the meantime. And the comparison I'll give you, the illusion I'll give you, last year, Christian McCaffrey entered the football season with lingering calf injury, lingering Achilles injury. And you know what happens when you have a compromised Achilles? Your ankles are very prone to injury. And that's exactly what happened to Christian McCaffrey. Hell, I can speak to it myself as somebody who's taken up running as a hobby, as something to do exercise-wise. I hurt my right knee from overexertion, had a little bit of runner's knee, stubbornly tried to power through it, and in compensating for my sore right knee, my left knee started to hurt. So when you are consistently injured, when you are chronically injured, it is hard to stay healthy. And the last point I want to get in here, neither Connor or Leon are what we would consider a perpetually injured player. Connor has been very healthy throughout his NHL career. The longest absence came as a rookie when he broke his collarbone, only played 45 games that first year. And by and large, he's been a healthy player. And same thing with Leon. And you never want guys to miss games, of course, but you always would rather have them miss a few games here in March than you would a game in April or May, because the stakes there are a lot higher. And if Connor or Leon are hurt enough that they're not going to go for a playoff game, they're really injured. And in that case, that's telling you, well, the outlook of our team is fundamentally different without these guys. And that's why it's so imperative you take the time now, you manage this, you get this right, and you lucked out the way the schedule is laid out this week, or you play Saturday and then you don't play again until the following Wednesday. It puts you in a position to get those guys treatment to avoid even missing practices. You'll practice probably twice in the 3 days between Sunday and Wednesday, but at the same time, you want to put those guys in a position to be successful. And you have the lingering returns of Trent Frederick and Evander Kane, who, if you watched the game on Saturday night, you saw them down the tunnel after the game giving out fist bumps. This team has to manage their injuries, and it's an important component of playoff success. It is arguably the single most important component of playoff success. You can't have good players out. You can't be injured. You need to get lucky, and injuries are one of those things where if you have a good injury year one year, you're more likely, statistically, to have injuries the following year. And even if you do try and avoid the chronically injured players, sometimes it does happen. That's the nature of hockey. We are going to take our first break of today's edition of Locked On Oilers. And when we come back, we're going to tackle who stands to benefit and the opportunities that lie ahead, even if it's only a couple of games for guys in the absence of Connor and Leon, right after this. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you, unsaturated fats to help you keep feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no-shell variety. They're the perfect grab-and-go snack for busy days, whether I'm here at my desk working on the show, in the car, or I'm just trying to get a quick protein fix to hit my macros for the day. They're a strong go-to. Or if you're old school and you love cracking open the shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. Wonderful Pistachios is a complete protein, providing all 9 essential amino acids. Get snackin' and get crackin' with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Victory Monday edition of Locked On Oilers as we discuss how the Oilers can go about making the most of this. And you never want guys to be injured, but it does present an opportunity. And that's what the great thing about sports is. You never know who might have one of those games. I always think one of the first hockey games I can ever recall watching was Game 7 of Flames Lightning back in 2004 and the Fedotenko goals. And I was very perplexed as to why Ruslan Fedotenko was doing all of that for Tampa Bay, you know, on a team with Vinny LeCavalier, with Marty St. Louis, a very good team. And it was Ruslan Fedotenko. And you think about Devontae Smith-Pelly scoring that goal for the Capitals against the Golden Knights, those depth goals. You think about Luosterainen last year for the Panthers, both against the Rangers and against the Oilers. Those depth guys matter. Once you get to a certain point of the postseason, every team has the stars for the most part, unless it's a weird year. If you get a weird year where you get somebody in the conference finals kind of by accident, then maybe it's a different conversation. But by and large, when you get to that conference final, the other team's going to have as many star players as you, if not more. And no, I'm not saying anyone has a 1-2 up front, especially now, as good as Connor and Leon, but there are teams in the West who have 2 or 3 superstars up front, and that's enough to balance it out. And I'm not saying the Oilers lose those minutes, but it's going to be a close battle in those minutes, and that's where your depth really matters. And this brings me to one of my favorite topics, and this is one of the conceptual ideas that I've really come around on and I find really interesting to discuss. But the idea of usage versus efficiency. So when we talk about usage, whenever we do a deep dive episode on Locked On Oilers, where we talk specifically about one player, we always start with the context, the usage. How many minutes do they play? Do they play special teams? Who are their most common line mates? Who are their most common defensemen? What's their quality of competition? What line do they play on the team? And what are the reasonable expectations for what that line does when it's put together? So, for example, we talked a lot this year about Jeff Skinner's role in Buffalo last year, where he was playing with Tage Thompson and Alex Tuch. His goal was to shoot the puck a lot. He was out there on Buffalo's first line to generate as much offense as he possibly could. Defense did not matter. That's very different from the role Jeff Skinner has been pigeonholed to some degree here in Edmonton, where he's played on the third line with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and Connor Brown. He's gotten some run with Connor McDavid, and he's gotten some run with Leon Draisaitl. And that context matters. And now, with no Connor and no Leon, there is ample opportunity here for someone to earn themselves more opportunity. And moments like this don't come around all that often. If you're somebody like a Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, like an Adam Henrique, a Janmark, a Connor Brown, even a Corey Perry, or a Max Jones for that matter, if you're one of those guys who's been on the periphery, or maybe you're not that happy with the season you're having, you put together a good week and a half in Connor and Leon's absence, all of a sudden Chris Knobloch might have a different perspective of you. And we know hockey coaches are liable to run the hot hands, that if a player is going well, they're not going to break up the lineup. We know coaches hate to change their lineup in any way after a team wins a game, let alone if a team is in a good run of form. So you play well in this week or so until Connor and Leon come back. And it's day to day. You know, would it surprise me if Connor forced his way back into the lineup by like Thursday of this week? No, it wouldn't. But you want to manage this and manage it well. And if you're one of these guys who wants a chance, this is it. Because once Connor and Leon are back, you're going to see a radical reorganization of the lineup again. In any team, when you're missing your first and second line center and your two best power play forwards, you are going to have to readjust a lot. But what I mean by that is your opportunity, if you're Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, to say, hey, I think you should play me on the first line with Connor and Hyman come playoff time. This is it. And I know Chris Knobloch said, well, we like Nugent center. We're probably going to keep him there. And for now, that's fine. You need centers. It's okay if he plays center. But if he shows you a nice offensive flair over the next few games in a larger role, and that's where we get to the efficiency versus usage. So if Nuge plays more minutes, in theory, he's going to be less effective because he's not a materially impactful player. He's not a play driver. He doesn't drive a line. He's a supplementary player. He has useful components to his game. He's got good puck skills. He's got good puck IQ where he knows where the puck needs to go and he can get it there. He's got decent hands. He's got an okay shot. And he's got okay defensive instincts, but nothing superb, nothing tremendous. And occasionally when you have a guy like that, you see the glimmers. And I think that's what's so interesting about a guy who was a first round pick more than 10 years ago now is Nuge was a first overall pick a long time ago. And as he's gotten older, he has changed components of his game. He has refined elements of his game and maybe become a little bit more well-rounded than he was earlier in his career. And frankly, probably a little more defense first in terms of his impact, purely because the foot speed's not as there. And look, he was never the fastest guy in the world, but that's a conscious decision you have to make at a certain point in your career as an athlete, where I only have so much energy I can expend in a given moment, in a given shift. And if I burn it all trying to make a play on offense, I can't get back on defense. And then vice versa. If I burn it all defensively, I don't have anything to give you offensively. So that's one of the real efficiency and usage dilemmas. I think in an ideal world, you're probably going to play Nuge on the third line, whether that's at center or left wing come playoff time. And it becomes a question of what are we going to do with Adam Henrique? I know I've talked to more than one Oiler fan in the last few weeks who's made the point they probably should be playing Henrique on the wing. And there's a strong argument Adam Henrique might be the fourth line left wing come playoff time if Evander Kane and Trent Frederick are actually back, because Adam Henrique doesn't deserve to play higher in the lineup over those guys. And if you want to say, well, Knobloch trusts him, the penalty killing, they want to keep him and Brown together. Sure. I think come playoff time, you want to use the best lineup you possibly can. And I don't think Henrique, Connor Brown, and Janmark have been bad, but they haven't been as good as they were last year in the playoffs. And they were never going to replicate that crazy shooting percentage over 15% in the playoffs. But like, it feels like you're kind of chasing something that's not there. And that's really the conundrum here. I like all three of those guys on an individual level, but this week is really a sink or swim moment here. If you're an Adam Henrique, if you're a Connor Brown, if you're a Matthias Janmark or a Max Jones, if you're a guy who is on the bubble of this roster where depending on the night you might come out, this is a good a chance you're going to get to prove you deserve to stay in the lineup when everyone is healthy again. And those opportunities do not come around a whole lot in the NHL. You are not being given one because something had to happen to make it happen, but you're kind of being given a shot here. So make the most of it. That's how we're going to wrap that. We are going to take our second and final break of today's show. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about the games upcoming this week, when you could expect Connor and Leon back, and a whole lot more. So be sure to stick around to this edition of Locked On Oilers. We've got your team covered every day. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where'd all my money go? Between going out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's really easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in as your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You could track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food, whether it was takeout or going out to dinner. Now, I budget a little bit smarter, I meal prep, and I save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out here on this Victory Monday edition of Locked On Oilers after a nice win on Saturday, something you really kind of needed for the vibe, just to kind of bring the temperature down. And in theory, you might get Connor and Leon back by Saturday against the Flames. It's to be determined if that's actually going to happen or not. You heard what Chris Knobloch said. It's day-to-day. With Leon, it's a nagging injury. You want to put these guys in a position to be successful with the playoffs looming. Yes, these games matter, but we also are in a good spot. So there's a lot to balance here, and this presents one of the real ethical quandaries of professional sports today, where if you ask the athlete, if you ask Connor, you ask Leon, do you want to play? Regardless of how badly they're hurting, unless they physically can't walk, they're probably going to try. And that is admirable from a resilience and toughness standpoint. But at the same time, you worry about them as athletes. You wonder about what playing with a sprained whatever the injury is going to do to everything else. Because like we talked about, we made that McCaffrey comparison. You have a sprained knee. Well, even if you try and play through it, you're not going to be as ambulatory as you normally would. Your agility is going to be a little bit off. You are going to be compensating for that injury. You're going to be walking a little bit different when you're out of skates. You're going to be skating differently to compensate for that discomfort. And that is going to lead to compromising of another. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but muscles, joints, ligaments, these are all interconnected. So if one is compensating for another, it's all interconnected, and that's going to lead to a further and a recurring injury. And that's why it's so important that the Oilers get on top of this now, because come playoff time, you are going to be in battles of attrition where it really will be the last guy standing that ultimately ends up making the difference. And the schedule this week, you do luck out in not playing until Wednesday. So you got Monday, you got Tuesday, then you got Wednesday. And then it gets interesting where you have the Stars, who you have had some really good games this regular season with. You have the Kraken on the second half of a back-to-back, so you get one Pickard, one Skinner, just depends on the order. Then you go back out there Saturday night for a Battle of Alberta, and then you get 2 days off again, and you're out there again against Vegas next Tuesday. So you've got a little bit of breathing room between these games, and the first and most important thing is Connor and Leon getting healthy. There can be no ambiguity. There can be no equivocation. This team is not going anywhere without either of those guys. It is absolutely imperative that Connor and Leon are as healthy as they can be when we drop the puck for game one of round one, about a little less than a month now, about 3 weeks away from now, about 10 regular season games or so, depending on what team we're talking about. And it is a real grind just to get here. And you look around this team and you realize just how essential the big boys are to this project. We've talked all year long about the Oilers' pyramid of success. At that foundation is dominating the Connor and Leon minutes. You need to win those minutes as convincingly as you can, because it's not realistic to expect an Adam Henry, Connor Brown, Matthias Janmark third line, or a Max Jones, Corey Perry, Podkolzin fourth line to win their minutes in terms of goals for and against as convincingly as it is for your superstars. And that's the difference. When you are that caliber of player, there is an expectation that you can do more than your teammates, and your teammates can count on you when we get down to the nitty-gritty. And we're going to see. I do think it was very funny to see Chris Knobloch say, well, yeah, Adam Henrique's played 17 minutes a night before in his career. He can pick up some more. Kapanen's played in the top six before. He can do that too. And, well, yes, those both are factual statements. you do understand that he has to say things like that you have to talk up the guys you do have access to, because being realistic doesn't help you. If you're Chris Knobloch and you come out and say, well, without Connor and Leon, there's really no point. I mean, you can't do that as a professional hockey coach, even though it's the truth. Sometimes it's not in your favor to be honest with your fan base, with the public, because it can only hurt you. We talked about that a ton leading up to the trade deadline in terms of a goaltender, that even if the Oilers wanted a goalie, it wouldn't benefit them to come out and say that, because teams would just drive a harder bargain. But I feel reasonably okay that if we're only talking about a week, the Oilers can live. Now, are they going to win? That's a different story. But I think the Oilers can be a functional hockey team for 3 or 4 games in the absence of Connor and Leon. Now, they got to get those guys right and relatively fast, but this is okay. This is short term. Long term, this is over. This project does not work if both are not healthy. Even if only one is in the lineup, that's not enough. As great as Connor is, as great as Leon is, this team is built around having 2 guys that can just play bully ball when the chips are down. Connor and Leon out there, and they can will. And that's what separates them apart for me. That at times, Connor's just going to put his head down. He's going to jitterbug through everybody, and he's going to generate a good scoring chance. It doesn't always go in, but once or twice a game, if Connor wants to get to the net, he's doing it. And frankly, he should do it more, but that's a different conversation for a different episode. Without that in their back pocket, without Leon in the trigger spot on the power play, without Leon to set guys up, those are essential components of what makes the Oilers successful. And the Oilers have definitely had more bumps in the road this year than they did last year. They are not playing as smoothly at this point in the season this year as they were last year. They I shouldn't say definitely, probably. That kind of sounds like an Oasis album, but they need to figure out what their playoff lineup is going to look like. They have a little over 3 weeks left to do that. This is a golden opportunity for an Adam Henrique, a Connor Brown, a Matthias Janmark, a Jeff Skinner, a Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, a Kasperi Kapanen, a Corey Perry. This is a golden opportunity to prove to the organization, to prove to your coach, I deserve to be in the playoff lineup, because when Connor and Leon were out, I went out there and I did blank. That's the way you need to approach this week if you're somebody who could be on the outside looking in of this lineup come playoff time. But that will do it for today's edition of Locked On Oilers. If you could be so kind, please, please, please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts or over on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Oilers your first listen of the day. For your second listen, go check out Locked On NHL, covering the biggest stories across the league with the local expertise of Locked On. I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Until then, let's go Oilers.